really for much of it, the first decades of its history was marked by key monumental figures like Stead and like Sabiston. And what really started to transpire in the late 90s and early 2000s was the Duke healthcare enterprise was growing by leaps and bounds, and there wasn't the same closeness of practice where a lot of the physicians would necessarily know each other, for instance. I was speaking with an endocrinologist who's been at Duke now, this is his 62nd year the other day, and he noted that all the clinics used to be co-located in what's now Duke South, and so to consult a colleague about a patient was as simple as sticking your head out the door and calling down the hallway. Now Duke has over 3 hospitals, got about 34 clinics in the surrounding counties around Durham, as well as ambulatory surgery centers and other operations. And so it's really a vast enterprise. There's thousands of people who practice day in, day out in different Duke affiliates, and so there's not the same closeness. And the idea, in part behind the model, was let's try and crystallize and consolidate some of what it means to be a Duke leader in medicine, and that's, can be anyone on the healthcare team.
There weren't any leadership models applicable for healthcare. As a result, we had 2 Feagin Scholar teams really work on research to try to develop a model that was appropriate for leadership in healthcare. And those teams came up with a model that really found a core principle in patient-centeredness. And the other competencies that really stood out as important for effective leadership in healthcare were emotional intelligence, teamwork, critical thinking, integrity, and selfless service. And those 5 competencies around the core principle of patient-centeredness really form the basis for the healthcare leadership model. We define leadership in healthcare as the ability to influence others for the benefit of patients and patient populations. This healthcare leadership model helps us to do that. We originally developed the model for the School of Medicine and for physicians. What we found is that there's a need for effective leadership across all of healthcare, and these competencies, as we use the model, are appropriate for all providers, for everybody that contributes to the care of patients.
When you think about critical thinking in the context of medicine or healthcare, what initially comes to mind is what is your didactic knowledge on a certain pathology or your understanding of a certain disease process, and then your ability to ascertain information from a patient, digest that, come up with a solution to the problem and implement that solution. So your examination, your diagnosis, and your treatment all involve the ability to think critically about something. However, in the context of leadership, your ability to also process, going back to your skill set, what is your knowledge base, what may be lacking in that knowledge base, how to effectively bring people in that might fill that void such that you come to a successful outcome for that patient.
So I think service is obviously an integral part of medicine. It's kind of part of it is why we all decided to become doctors, because we want to help people, we want to heal people, and we want to be there for them during kind of these difficult times. But I think as a leader, what we've learned is there are a lot of different aspects of selfless service. So it's making sure that as a leader, you act in a way where you're inspiring your team members, but you're also doing it in a way where you never feel that you're not also going to be a part of that work, and you're kind of making sure that you're just as much a part of the team as everyone else is.
Teamwork is the means by which individuals with different skill sets come together in order to accomplish a goal. So in healthcare, the goal is a successful outcome for that patient. Now you might have a various number of individuals on a team that is caring for that patient, and they're all going to have different skill sets. And so bringing all of us together in a room with these different skill sets and being able to effectively communicate about that is important to the successful outcome for that individual.
So I think integrity takes on kind of a variety of different meanings. I think that above all, it kind of encompasses treating others around you with respect. And I think it also includes treating yourself with respect and knowing when we do make mistakes, to being able to own up to those mistakes. But I think it also just means conducting yourself in a way where you're constantly kind of thinking of others and thinking of what the best way to approach something is, and making sure that you're putting others ahead and kind of considering what their needs are above just your own. So emotional intelligence, I think, is one, being able to build relationships and being able to consistently follow through on those relationships and kind of seeing what each relationship brings to the table. I think that given, all that we've spoken about with teamwork being important in the healthcare model, and that's something that we focus a lot through the Feagin program, it's also important to have that self-awareness of what your role is in the team and kind of what your role is in the greater scheme of kind of taking care of patients.
In healthcare, by nature, we develop relationships with multiple people, whether that be our colleagues, whether that be our students, whether that be our mentors, whether that be our patients. And the effective management of those relationships is vital to not only your success as a healthcare practitioner, but also your enjoyment in your job and what you do.
So leadership isn't just at a national level or at a health system level or at a state level. It is something that needs to happen with every interaction you have. So you're rounding with your residents and your medical students and you come across a challenging situation, and it provides language by which you can identify what the problem is, identify the barriers to providing care, how as doctors you can overcome that, and then the residents and the younger residents and the medical students can then sort of say, oh, I learned about teamwork, and this is an example of it. I can then model it for the other medical students.
In my clinical setting, which is an outpatient setting now, I'll work with medical students and I'll work with residents, and we'll see patients together. And using the model and the language of the model, I can describe and emphasize to those learners how the things that we're doing as we take care of a patient, how that's developmental for them in terms of their leadership, in terms of the long-term needs that they have to be effective physicians. And since I've now seen the model and start to use the model and teach the model, it helps me think differently about the things that I do just by nature in taking care of my patients. And it makes me be conscious of the patient-centered approach of care and thinking about that from a behavior modeling standpoint for a learner, and then trying to be intentional when I have those learners to describe the behaviors that I'm using or the techniques that I'm using to have a conversation with a patient or to advocate for them or to coordinate their care with other healthcare providers.
I think it's important to have these values ingrained into our education before we even get on the wards, so that once we are interacting with patients, it's part of our everyday practice. It also gives us a set of skills to start utilizing in practice course. So that's one of the places that I've really felt like this model comes through, is in our interactions with even standardized patients or learning how to interview, learning how to empathize. I think it's something that if we have in the back of our brains from the beginning is really gonna make a lot more sense moving forward and can help us when we get on the wards. I genuinely believe that all medical students and future trainees should learn to be leaders. I think regardless of what being a leader means to you, within your interpersonal interactions with your patients, you're going to have to be a leader. It may not be the type of leadership that you're used to thinking of, but I think within the patient setting, you have to be an advocate for them, you have to be their guide, you have to learn how to navigate that interpersonal relationship. I saw this as a great opportunity to sort of build on the strengths that I already knew that I had, and then also hone in on some of the weaknesses that I was hoping to improve on.
My favorite part of LEAD is that it really emphasizes that leadership is something that can be worked on. It's not an innate quality that people have. It's really something that can be developed throughout someone's career, starting as a student.
As I've become more involved in the clinical team and leading teams as a fellow of the team, and also in research, leading research groups, I became very interested in expanding my skills in leadership. And then learning more about the Feagin program, I became convinced that this would be a great way to spend a year expanding my limited knowledge on leadership skills and traits, and really expanding the intentionality with which I lead instead of just more of a passive process.
Ultimately, everyone has big dreams for why they want to be a doctor. And I think if you pull most of us, it's to help people. That's why all of us are here. It's why we spend so many years in school and in training for residencies and fellowships. Medicine is a job of service, and patients are the people that we're here to help. So when designing a healthcare leadership model, that's our ultimate intent, is just to provide better care. And I think to be a good doctor and to really take care of people, you just have to have this sort of ethical center about yourself, this sense of pervading integrity that keeps you honest and keeps you accountable to being the best healthcare provider you can be. And that means actively engaging the other competencies that the Duke Healthcare leadership model has. It's a call to be emotionally intelligent and to work collaboratively with the members of your team and to keep learning and to keep thinking about the problems in front of you and to ultimately do all of this for, selfless reasons to help our patients. I keep a pocket-sized card of the Duke Healthcare leadership model right in my front waistcoat pocket, along with my Maxwell's physical exam guide, equally important in my opinion. And that to me, in a moment where I'm unsure of what to do, it gives me a framework to approach challenges to make sure that I'm being honest and valuing these competencies in the model.
Too often now, we are guided, led, directed by those that don't understand what that personal interaction with the patient means, whether they be business people, whether they be administrators, whether they be politicians. There's a lot of people in those roles that are well-meaning, but they don't know what that connection is to patients. We know that, and we've lost our leadership skills along the way. We need to introduce the educational aspects in our medical education programs that will help all of us to be more effective leaders so that we can influence things along with everybody else that helps us, instead of abdicating that responsibility to those that don't have that understanding of how to take care of patients.